Good morning, everyone. My name is Irena Bednarik, and I'm the Vice President of International Government Relations, looking after EMEA, APJ, and Latin America at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. On behalf of Forum Europe and HPE, I would like to warmly welcome all of you to the 8th edition of our Public Sector Transformation Conference. For those of you that have followed us in the previous editions, you will know by now that once a year we love to convene an event where senior international subject matter experts help us unpack a specific aspect of the digital transformation of governments in the European Union. So this year we have chosen to look and dig quite deeply in the subject of sovereign AI in public sector. And with the help of our distinguished panelists, we will try to analyze and assess how can we in the European Union build an ecosystem for AI that is sovereign, resilient, and trustworthy. As Commissioner Breton said it excellently last week at the Spanish Presidency AI conference, AI really is about three things. It is about compute, it is about data, and it is about algorithms. Today, we will actually unpack the first two dimensions of this equation. We will look at data and we will look at compute. AI has been propelled at the top of pretty much everybody's agenda over the last months and quarters. Public sector, private sector, big companies, small companies, pretty much everyone is talking about AI and trying to understand how we could actually reap the benefits of the AI revolution. The public discourse on AI, it's currently gravitating on pretty consistent themes that are typically ethics, what are the risks, how can we mitigate the risks, and what is the governance model at national and international level that we should collectively build. However, out of these global conversations, a critical component of the AI ecosystems is very often sidelined. And this is what we want to look at pretty closely today. Without compute capacity, there is actually no AI. And compute capacity is not only relevant because it is the sine qua non component to run any AI model, but it's also very critical if we want, as a European society, to avoid the next digital divide, which will be, or could be, hopefully we'll avoid it, but could be the divide between those that will have access to compute capacity powering AI and those that won't. And this will basically create a divide between the GPU rich and the GPU poor. So to discuss all of these fascinating topics today, we will organize the 3 hours that we have today together in our usual 3 parts. So we will start with 2 keynote speeches. And the idea here is really to gather a comprehensive overview of what is going on in the AI market in the European Union. Panel 1 will look at the data dimension, and we will look at sovereign AI in public sector and what is actually the value of interconnected data spaces for the purposes of AI. And we will try to understand whether we actually need interconnected data spaces to have larger data sets to nourish the AI models. In the second panel, which will be dedicated to compute capacity and the access to it. So as a key component to democratization of access, we will fundamentally look at 4 themes. We will look indeed at what is the status of compute capacity in the European Union. Do we have enough capacity or what are the projects to and plans to increase the available compute capacity. Secondly, we will look at the various infrastructure models that can underpin AI models, namely on-premise high-performance computing and cloud. Thirdly, we'll look at the sovereignty dimensions in the AI discourse and specifically at both potential infrastructure models. And last but not least, we will look at the role that the Euro-HPC-JU, the joint undertaking, has in powering AI, and we will look quite deeply here as well, and what are the current rules governing the access to this existing capacity, and whether there are any changes that need to be adopted. So, as you can see, a lot to cover today. So, with no further ado, I would love to introduce to the stage our first keynote speaker. And we are delighted, and actually I shall say really honored, to have with us today Europe's AI superstar. So Jonas Androulis is the CEO and founder of Aleph Alpha, a very successful multilingual AI model built and made in Europe. Jonas, thank you so much for being with us today. A real pleasure. And I would like to give you the floor to walk us through your experience, your very successful endeavor, and if you could share your personal experience in the opportunities you see in Europe and the challenges. The floor is all yours. Thank you, Jonas.
Thanks, Irina, and thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective. So in AI, and I think nobody really has to be convinced of this anymore, we are in the middle of an industrial revolution that can really redefine how humans and machines work together and can rebuild all our office work. And this is absolutely dearly necessary because we have a worker shortage pretty much everywhere, and the people, the experts that we have are completely overloaded with work. We're currently working on improving processes like check processes and confirmation processes that sometimes takes years and span hundreds of documents. So with this technology that this industrial revolution will bring, we have the opportunity to build a new generation of efficiency and quality and redefine what we mean when we say intelligent systems and intelligent machines. This will, of course, impact all industries. We're currently working in the financial sector, in security, in manufacturing, so really everywhere. There's tons of knowledge work. There's one kind of study that says about 60% of the GDP that we have in the Western world is knowledge work. And there's another study saying that even with today's generation of technology, so if there was no improvement and we would just leverage what AI can do today, we could reduce the amount of work in terms of time from every single person, every single employee, every single knowledge worker by about 60 or 70%. This is like a massive potential. So what does that mean, and what is the strategy here for world's best enterprises and governments? And this kind of ties into sovereignty. I believe it's absolutely crucial to develop your own strengths. You need to think about how can I run, how can I build, change, how can I capture value out of this technology. And this is not only limited to today, but also in 5 years. So how can I position myself now that I'll be in a strong position in 5 years and can take responsibility for the outcomes? This, of course, starts with data. Data is incredibly valuable and necessary. Even with AI becoming more and more powerful, a general purpose AI that is like a chatbot or something like that, that is trained on the whole internet, is wholly insufficient to solve the complex problems that we're facing, that our experts are facing every day. So building that data, securing it, curating it is the first important step, and also making sure that the data is safe. It's our responsibility to take care of that data. The next step is business transformation. So this is where your domain expertise comes in. Nobody knows better than you are experts how we can leverage this technology to build something new, to redefine human-machine collaboration and capture value out of that potential. And then basically the cherry on top is to position yourself for innovation. So there will groundbreaking innovations will come, and the groups and the institutions that are owning the problem are in a phenomenal position to go into a leading position here. So basically, what are the right partners that can help me position myself in a way where I have a good setup to start innovations, to build something that as of today, we cannot even imagine. We and Aleph Alpha, we have specialized on not only building one of the world's best language models, but also the technology around that. Basically running on different infrastructures. We own and operate Europe's most powerful commercial AI cluster, but also technology to fine-tune and specialize and integrate these models. And because at the current pace, pretty much technology changes every month almost, it seems, one of the key design principles for us is to build our platform future-proof. For us, that means that every training, every fine-tuning, every integration or configuration that our customers are currently applying to our platform is something that gets retained and can always be applied to future generation of models, of open source models, of our own models, and to future generations of our platform, because it's absolutely crucial to now make sure that the work that we are putting into generative AI now will not be lost in the future. One great example there is a solution we built together with the German government that is called F13. It's called F13 because that's kind of the key that is missing on our keyboards. And it currently has about 400,000 users. And it's a solution that is really specialized and is really tailored to the needs of this part of government. And why I like this example so much is because this solution creates multi-page Word documents that are compliant according to highly specific formats and highly specific requirements based on proprietary internal data and added. And what we're added here is something that currently only we can do. We have for every claim, for every factual claim, we can show where are confirming and where are contradicting sources in our data. So not just with a link, but going down into the text and kind of like highlighting the certain words and parts of text that confirm or disagree with. So that's a phenomenal solution, but really we're in all industries, we're now seeing basically customers and partners understanding that the big value potential lies beyond chatbots or copywriting. For everybody that wants to leverage this technology, you have to basically think through all the steps that are needed for that. Infrastructure build and operate. Right? How do you make sure that you got the right partners to build and run your infrastructure? How do you get industry know-how and data? Hopefully you got it yourself, but maybe you also have partners. Who can help you with co-innovation and productization? Who can run integration, data pipelining, and consulting, and who can help you with scaling that up and distributing that to, in our case, 400,000 users. I was in like, I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, I was at Bletchley Park and we talked about the risks of these solutions with pretty much the brightest AI researchers in the world. And Aleph Alpha really has a unique approach here in the sense that we believe, because we are not a B2C company, we are serving world's best enterprises and governments. We believe that it is not on us to decide what a desired, what a required behavior is, but we have put all our engineering focus on building tools for transparency and control. And this is where we are leading the pack. Kind of nobody can offer better tools and better frameworks to tailor the behavior and understand the behavior of these systems to individual requirements. And these are very different. They're very different from, like, we're running a digital citizen assistant for kind of one German city, where it's important that the language is easy, that's always friendly and helpful. But our model is also driving business process modeling inside SAP Signavio, right? And the risks and the configurations for these two use cases are vastly different. Right, so this is really what we're focusing on. And this also for us means sovereignty. Sovereignty means that all the partners and customers have all the transparency and all the control they need to take responsibility for the outcomes. Because in these critical and complex use cases, basically just hoping that a chatbot will give you the right answer is not enough. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jonas. And you already touched upon some very interesting concepts. So the first one that I would call out, reducing the time that we spend at work by 60 or 70%, if I catch that correctly. That, I think, it's a wish of many people. But then a few concepts that we will unpack further in the panel. So you're talking about control, transparency, and obviously you also mentioned that you have a pretty unique capability in tracing back the contradicting or confirming sources of the results. And so that is for sure very noteworthy, because it's obviously answering a lot of the questions that a lot of governments are actually struggling with. And we will hear we have today 5 member states with us. Maybe before you leave us, I would just have one question. So I understand that the Aleph Alpha LLM model is multilingual by default. And I was curious if you could share with our audience, when you designed the model, why did you decide to do it multilingual? And what is the difference with models that, on the other hand, are actually translating from one language to the other?
That's a great question. And there's several advantages. So what we did is we trained our model with multiple languages from the very beginning. So it kind of grew up multilingual. And this has resulted in the model that has a very good aligned understanding in different languages. So you can mix languages. So if you had like a text that would be mixing languages, or you could ask questions that are answered in French, let's say, based on a text that's only in German, right? And so that's kind of really powerful. It is we've shown that because the model basically achieves this shared representation, we're actually not really losing a lot of capability, right? Because you might think that if you train on 5 languages, our next generation will have 6 languages, that this kind of costs you a lot of performance. But it's actually not really the case, because the models have some sort of world understanding that translates or transists all language representation. So that's quite powerful. But yeah, of course, and for us, it was also incredibly important to capture the cultural knowledge and the cultural identity of these different languages, right? So because if you translate, to your point, Irina, if you basically translate a, let's say, English-speaking model all the time, then the English-speaking model will always have the biases of this language. A great example we've shown in our models is if you ask our model in different languages about sports, then it defaults, if you ask in English, then it defaults to something like football. And if you ask in German or French, it defaults to something like soccer. And that's quite interesting. And that's just a silly example, but cultural knowledge and cultural identity is everywhere.
That's great, and it's very cool that actually your LLM model works even when you mix languages. I'm Italian, Slovenian, so I mix the 2 languages all the time. So when a Slovenian LLM will be available, I'll be very happy to have the ability to mix both languages. All right, thank you so much, Jonas, for being with us and for providing this very interesting perspective to help our audience to have a real overview of the land and the key topics. Congratulations again on your very successful business, and we wish you a great continuation and more successes to come. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So we will now move to our second keynote speaker, Sorin Keran. Sorin is Fellow Vice President and Global CTO of Data and AI at HPE. And I would like to welcome you, Sorin, on the stage. And thank you so much for being with us today. So we already heard from Jonas some preliminary key pillars that we need to address. And I would welcome to hear from you and your perspective. What are the key challenges? What are the key opportunities?
Hi, Irena, and good morning, everybody. And Irena, as you want to see Slovenian, I've been working with Jonas for many years now, and I would welcome Romanian as well as part of the the series of languages. However, covering Italian, I think it's fine as well. So, as I've been working with HP for many years, and as Irena said, I'm currently the global CTO for data and AI, but my other head at HP is to drive innovation as part of the CTO office. And I think until November 22, my job was rather easy because I was covering other areas as well. But from the AI perspective, was smooth, right? And because we've been looking at artificial intelligence for many years, we've been deep diving into computer vision, convolutional neural networks, and we've been working with governments and enterprises on how to integrate those type of use cases into their pipelines and so on. Yes, we are still discussing data strategies and so on and so forth, but it was on a very smooth path. We were adopting and thinking about GPT-3 and other things and so on. But in November 23, with the launch of OpenAI ChatGPT, right, things accelerated because people realized that AI, and especially large language models and generative AI, can quickly accelerate the way they interpret and have access to information. So basically, what happened in November 22 is that then we've seen a series of announcements through the past year that forced everybody from schools to hospitals, to golf courses, to manufacturing, to government, to figure out, how do I put in place a data strategy? How do I think about governance? How do I think about adopting these new technologies? Right. So suddenly my life as keeping up with innovation became really, really complicated. And I've been working with Jonas for many years, and we talk often, and we're both looking at how fast things started to move. But what also happened in November 22 is that we finally realized that AI is powered by high quality data. We knew it, but we realized that without actually having a foundational high quality data, then basically whatever comes out on the other end, no matter if you're summarizing text, if you're looking at predictive maintenance, it doesn't matter which use case, basically whatever you put in, this actually comes out. But being able to have a correct data strategy, you realize quickly that data is the driving force for innovation and growth. Now, at the European level, data economy is set to reach close to about the $1 trillion threshold in 2023, which is an important share of the GDP, right? And even more importantly, EU, part of the Digital Decade program, basically set an ambitious target of about 75% of the businesses need to embrace either AI, cloud, maybe a bit less big data, but AI, cloud, and big data by 2030. Now, what also happened in November starting with November, was that governments and the European Union and governments and policymakers realized that AI is in the open. And suddenly, due to the mistakes that AI made, due to the data sharing, data leakage that actually happened when we're using these AI models, due to the realization that we don't have regulations in place, everybody is running now to start regulating AI. And you had Senate hearings, you had EU meetings, you have UK meetings, and so on. EU most likely has to finalize its landmark AI Act by the end of 2023, while everybody else is running to do the same. Now, in this complex environment, not only that as European level we need to start regulating this, but we also need to be ahead of the game while we introduce regulations and so on and so forth. However, what we see is that we are actually decreasing in the ICT market by about 10 points, right, from 21 maybe to 11-ish, and other regions are actually growing. For example, US share, part of the ICT market, is actually increasing in the same period for the past 8 years with about the same percentage. So we do need to up our game in how do we enable artificial intelligence across across Europe, and we do need to up our game on how do we enable a cohesive data strategy in order to make sure that we are enabling more than what we have today. About 8% of the business are using AI today, so in European Union, so we need to be able to actually increase that at a much faster pace. Now, what Irene said, and also what was also clear from Jonas, is that in order to develop these large AI models, in order to push the boundaries of efficiency and automation and handling, for example, citizen requests, in order to push this to allow schools and hospitals to properly use it, we have a problem. The problem is basically twofold. The first one is the computing power that you need in order to train these models, and the second one is skills, right? So I'm happy that Jonas actually delivered the first part of the keynote, because we need to enable more startups like Aleph Alpha. We need to enable more centers of excellence for people that have the skills to develop those models. While in parallel to that, the models that they develop is as good as the compute they have underneath, right? And I think Irene already mentioned that last week we emphasized how important, as part of the European AI Alliance in Spain, how important is compute to development of AI, but we need to make sure that we enable those startups, we enable the governments, we enable the we enable companies to actually have access to compute power, right? So the two go hand in hand. I can have compute power, but I can't have the skills. I need the skills, fantastic, I'll get them, but I need to enable them to be able to design models. The models they design are as good as the data, but even more importantly as well, are as good as how much compute power I actually give them. So the fact that as part of the 2024 work program, the European Commission announced the AI Grand Challenge is a very big plus, right? So being able to enable startups to use the resources of Euro HPC-JU is basically a very good step forward. Because otherwise, as Irene mentioned as well, we are actually going to always see a divide between who has access to compute power, who doesn't have access to compute power. Let them call them GPUs, accelerators, or whatever other else, compute power. As Jonas mentioned, we've been working closely with Jonas as well, for example, in order to understand, while GPUs are here to stay, NVIDIA's GPUs or AMD GPUs, what are the alternative accelerators, or how do we actually make sure that we stay aligned with that as well? So access to compute power is critical in order to make sure that we stay competitive and we don't create the divide that Irena mentioned between poor and rich players, to poor and rich from the point of view of obviously access to compute. So I think today's conference is going to focus more or less on 3 key points. The first one is AI is set to generate unprecedented scale of efficiency within the public sector, no matter if we are talking about education, healthcare, government, climate change, and so on and so forth. It is going to deliver efficiencies and automation to the various parts of the public sector. The second piece is that I think Irena mentioned as well is, where do I actually get this compute power? How governments and how is the European public sector going to have access to compute power? Simply is going to be either in cloud or on-prem or both, because there are a lot of companies that are actually looking at, companies and governments that are looking at something that we call hybrid. It's either cloud or it's on-prem. And point number 3 is, which policies do we need to put in place to democratize access to this compute? Because unless we have the resources we need, we can't develop AI. I will quickly unpack for the next 3 minutes these 3 topics, and then, because it seems that we are a bit late, and then Irena, I'll be asking, maybe I'll be giving some food for thought questions, and then I'll be passing it quickly over to you. From the integrations in the public sector, I think the most visible one obviously is healthcare, where basically AI has a proven track record of improving citizen health outcomes, either by underpinning drug discovery or enabling better diagnostics through computer vision, or simply streamlining the processes and access to healthcare. Personally, HP and my team has been working jointly with DZNE, for example, and a couple of years back, we've published on the cover of Nature the work that we've done jointly on Swarm Learning and how do we enable researchers that are part of different organizations across Germany to have access to the same data to write better algorithms. And we've been working since then, we're working jointly on other initiatives as well. Or for example, we've been helping various hospitals like the St. Catharina Hospitals in Netherlands to use algorithm to proactively detect heart failure and actually deliver more accurate diagnosis. So in healthcare, AI is definitely going to have a very strong impact. Another very good impact, which I think maybe a couple of days back was already in the news, is basically climate change. And governments are basically using AI to tackle climate change in various ways, anything from climate modeling to weather forecasting to prediction tools and so on and so forth. And what I said a couple of days back was that I think DeepMind GraphCast, in a work jointly with ECMWF, announced that GraphCast actually could predict some unseen records better than some of the gold standards that for weather forecasting that the high resolution forecast system, or HRES, that ECMWF actually has. And there's a lot more work to do. It's not across all the various prediction models. It's not across, it's not more than 10 days or whatever, but we already see the sparks of truly the power of artificial intelligence in climate change. In our case, one of our supercomputers that is actually part of EuroHPC JU, hosted in Finland, we've been using that not only, for example, to power 20% of the surrounding city of Kajani while the supercomputer is actually running, but also is one of the European Commission's flagship for it's one of the European Commission computing sources for the flagship project called Destination Earth. So, which basically you're going to hear a bit more, I think, in panel 1 a bit later today. Now, let me go to the second point, which is cloud or on-prem, right? Organizations have actually two choices, and the nature, the cloud nativity nature of AI would say that it needs a lot of resources, and it needs a lot of resources with a certain stack being delivered underneath, that you can actually have it natively in the cloud, or you can actually have it natively now on a supercomputing or on a high-performance cluster somewhere on-prem. You could have both, or you could have one or another. But which one, and what is the strategy in selecting all of those? Well, cloud computing is one of the first answers, and this is what I was saying, AI actually is cloud native because of the stack underneath. But you have some problems with cloud computing in the sense data is stored and processed in the cloud, and because of the various regulations that we have in place in the European Union, that might be a problem because we need data gravity, we need data privacy, we need data security. So if cloud companies can actually ensure that the data stays within the European Union boundaries, that's great. And we've seen a lot of European companies building AI clouds in order to serve Europe. This, in the past 6 months, HP has been working jointly with a lot of cloud companies around European Union to actually build these clouds. However, I'm actually waiting, I apologize, for the upcoming cloud rulebook to actually understand how Europe actually thinks about the cybersecurity certification for cloud services, as we've been working with these local companies, and they're looking forward to understand how they, together with us, will be able to serve Europe. On the other hand, you actually, as I was saying, you have supercomputing for AI, and where governments can actually build supercomputers as part of AI national strategies, for example, and basically serve the national interest within the startups, the companies, the business that are actually within the country and within European Union. However, the high cost of these systems and the supply chain for this system is actually a barrier for entry, because while you can build thousands and thousands of GPUs, they are expensive, and in some case, given the environment we're in today, you might wait for a very long time before you actually have access to them. So one solution would be, for example, for the EuroHPC JU to basically build a federated high-performance computing across Europe to serve AI workloads. However, there is a bit of work to be done between the stack that is in for HPC and the stack that is in for AI, as I was saying. But having an idea on how to do that is actually a step in the right direction. Finally, The last point is that I wanted to cover quickly today is how do we democratize compute capacity, right? We need to make sure that we give access to people, and this is a problem that we definitely, hopefully, will be able to discuss today. How do we give access, as I was saying earlier, to startups? How do we build services? How do we actually have teams that are able to not only to enable access to computers, to supercomputers and to compute capacity, but also support the businesses and the startups in their journey of understanding what they need. From the HP perspective, we understand the importance of routing the AI supply chain in Europe, and this is why some of our biggest clusters and systems have actually been built in our factory in Czech Republic. And in parallel to that, as I was saying, that you need to advise startups and businesses, we actually build various centers of excellence across Europe to be able to support with that journey. We have an AI and data center in Spain, in Las Rozas. Here, where I live in Grenoble, we'll actually build a huge training AI scale system in order to actually help European companies in Europe. We've been developing machine learning talents in Greece, and we have a large center now in Ireland that actually is looking only at generative AI. And all of those under this idea of working with companies like Jonas, working with companies like Aleph Alpha, in order to make sure that we are supporting this data and AI sovereignty of European Union. Now, the last thing here is the importance of partnership, as Jonas said, between public and private sectors. This is where partnership with industry, anything from HP to Aleph Alpha and others, become crucial, and governments can collaborate with trusted private sector partners to build the skills and experience to swiftly deliver AI infrastructures and to make sure that we are democratizing access to compute. Now, as you're actually going to start the next couple of hours into the next panels, the next couple of hours, I'd like to leave you with some questions, which basically I live in Europe, and I'm in the, let's say, in the world stage around AI, and I'm listening. Obviously, I'm aligned with the various startups and companies, and I understand a bit of what is going on. But there are some things that actually keep me up at night. The first one is, what is the EU plan to ensure that Europe will have the necessary access to compute power in order to be able to develop these AI models, in order to make sure that we are powering companies like Aleph Alpha and others, we are powering businesses to actually be able to adopt and operationalize AI. And then the other thing is, I've been involved in a lot of discussions around national AI strategy. So do member states actually plan to install their own computing infrastructure to ensure AI data sovereignty, or they want to rely on cloud computing services? And I've been working with member states, and I've heard various theories, and I would be actually curious to understand, how do we come up? Is there a common strategy? Is there a common preference? And how do we actually make sure that we are solving for that as well? Finally, we do have a stopgap, which is basically the Euro HPC-JU. So how will the Euro HPC-JU basically ensure that its supercomputers are AI ready? We've seen what happens in LUMI. We know LUMI very well. How can we make sure that not only we are powering HPC, but AI has slowly become a supercomputing or an HPC use case, so to speak, but it has very different requirements. So we need to make sure that we are making the changes in order to have this huge impact on AI. So I think these are important questions, and I've been discussing them across startups, across enterprises, across people that are working in governments, across member states, and I'm hoping that in the next couple of months we'll be able to at least take the right steps in the right direction. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm a bit over. Irena, back to you.
Thank you so much, Soren, for the excellent overview. And I think you touched upon a number of incredibly important issues. So everyone working in policies around the globe, and a lot of my fellow colleagues, indeed, we witness what you said, the frantic design of AI strategies everywhere. And we're very privileged today to have 5 European member states governments that will actually tell us more about how they're thinking about it and where they are in their journey. The second very important concept that I would like to highlight, as you said, data, garbage in, garbage out. So the critical question of data will be discussed now in the next panel. And on capacity, equally, we're very privileged to have today Gustav Kalbe from the Commission, that is critical figure in the design of Euro HPC-JU. And so we'll definitely address the capacity issue, and also the very exciting recent announcement in the State of the Union of opening up the capacity of the JU to the startups. So thank you so much for providing such an excellent transition. Sorin, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Elena. Have fun.
So we will now transition to the first panel. And first of all, I would like to apologize. We have been notified that in the platform that the audience was using, there were some streaming challenges and some quality issues. So we don't see this in the platform that we use for the speakers. So on behalf of Forum Europe, I would like to apologize for that. And I believe you have all received now a link on YouTube, which hopefully should fix the problem while the other platform gets rectified. So we will now transition to our first panel, and as we said at the outset, data. So sovereign AI in public sector, value of interconnected data spaces. So I would like, first of all, to welcome to the stage our distinguished panelists. So I would like to start with Andrea Halmos, Deputy Head of Unit Interoperability at DigiDigit in the European Commission. Hi, Andrea, and welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We then have Florian Pappenberger, Deputy Director General and Director of Forecasts at the Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, or known in European jargon as ECMWF. Since you have a very long appellation, Florian, welcome. We then have Elsa Castro, member of the Board of Directors from the Agency for Administrative Modernization of Portugal. Thank you so much, Elsa, for being with us. We then have Wouter Welling, Manager for Digital Inclusion, Data and AI, Digital Society Department at the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations of the Government of the Netherlands. Welcome, Wouter.
Thank you.
Pepe Bjerring, EMEA Business Development Manager, AI Platform Solutions at HPE. We have a further speaker that will join us in really a few minutes. I will already introduce him. He was caught up in the meeting. We have Anthony Rietel, the plenipotentiary of the Minister of Education and Science for Digital Transformation. And Anthony is also Deputy Director of GovTech Poland. So first of all, again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being with us today and helping us understand what do we do with the data that we need to bring them up to a quality and that is actually required to train the AI models. So to start unpacking this, we will start actually with the AI strategies of the various member states. And we heard also from Sorin that there has been a pretty dramatic acceleration in the work on these AI strategies. And so maybe, Wouter, I would start with you. If you could give us, at this stage, just maybe a very preliminary overview of what you guys are working. We'll look at use cases later on, but just to understand what are the main streams you're working on, what are your milestones, and then Elsa, if you could come in commenting from your perspective, since you are from the Portuguese Administration Modernization Agency, and it would be interesting to hear from you what is your role in accelerating AI adoption and what are your plans of your organization. So Wouter, I would actually start with you if that's okay.
That's okay, Irina. Thank you for having me. Well, let me explain the situation in the Netherlands. I'm calling in from The Hague. And in the Netherlands, we had several cabinet-wide sessions on AI policy and AI strategies. So the whole cabinet in the room, because we really decided that this is a systemic disruptive technology that changes all aspects of society. And that meant that it was not something that could be dealt with in, for example, my ministry, the Ministry of the Interior, or the Ministry of Economic Affairs, or the Ministry of Justice, or the Ministry of Safety. This is something that is disruptive for the whole of government. That's the first thing our cabinet realized, and they're now coming together to discuss this on recurring occasions. In July, we had the first broad policy letter on AI, and we are currently working at an extra policy letter, which is also shared by the whole of government, which is a vision on generative AI and use in society. Because we really decided this is a different point where a specific vision is needed of what the impact will be. And I think the basis is that the promise of I'm hearing some strange noise in my headphones, but the promise of unlimited compute power and releasing unprecedented forms of data processing power, that is something that really changed also the way how we govern a society, because this goes through all policy departments. And I think the base of the strategy in the Netherlands is that we must do this in a value-driven manner. So what we do is we decided that first the values that you want to assure in society should be decided on. And then we decide, okay, if we are focusing on human rights or economic opportunities or equality or democracy, what should then be the things we should assure when adopting this new technology? Because I think in the Netherlands, there's one thing is clear: we can't hold this back or completely abandon it in general, but we need to set clear what is the society we want to have in a few years, and what does it need in terms of guardrails to get to do this in a responsible manner. Let me give one example. I was at the AI summit in the UK a few weeks ago, and the Netherlands had strong points on value-driven innovation and how we are active in the EU level, for example, on the AI Act policy negotiations. And we spoke a lot about privacy, about authorship, about sensitive data. And what I was struck by was the discussions we had with some, let's say, rising countries, for example, from Africa. And what we know is that, for example, in the Department of Health, when it comes to radiologists, they were describing, look, the Netherlands, you have a lot of radiologists in your country. It's easy to be value-driven. But for us, this means opportunities for improving the lives of citizens. And we think privacy comes next. And I think that's the difficult challenge Europe has, that we are at a level of economic progress that we have the luxury to discuss these kind of things, but we must be aware that in most parts of the world, things that offer better quality of life will always come first. And I think that's the difficulty we have in the Netherlands, to discuss all these balances of geopolitics, human rights, economic opportunities, and human safety. Let me leave it to that.
Great. No, thank you, Wouter. Very relevant. And first of all, very interesting what you said about this being a full cabinet topic, which is, I think, the right way to go. And it's very, very relevant what you indicated on how your government already understood that this transformation will be underpinning any sector and aspect of society. And second thing that I thought is really noteworthy, as you say, we can't hold the AI revolution, but we need to make sure we channel it to the right objective. So very interesting thoughts. And Esa, do you want to comment on the role of your agency of administrative modernization in this debate?
Yes, thank you, Irina. Thank you for having me. I would like to start by greeting my fellow panelists and thank you for the invitation to be part of this discussion, which we are having at a good time. So the agency is the national entity in Portugal that is responsible for the modernization and digital transformation of the public sector. So we are focused on developing policies and tools for a better digital public sector. And the agency is under the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Administrative Modernization, which sits directly under the Prime Minister, and is therefore able to assume a cross-cutting role that reaches all areas of government and set the pace. So AI is still uncharted territory in many aspects, and the discussions around this topic is starting. We have already some pilot projects using AI, but as we assume this cost-cutting role, we can set the pace. The agency leads the National ICT Council, which sets the overall public administration digital strategy, and we work on guidelines for the development of public sectors, of public services. For instance, we've recently developed a common framework for designing and developing digital public services, and this framework, which is displayed on a website, provides a set of principles and best practices and tools for the design of development of user-friendly and efficient and accessible digital public services. And also, the agency is responsible for national key portals, such as Public Services Single Portal, which is called ePortugal, is a single entry point for public services, and the Open Data Portal, data.gov. Also, we develop fundamental building blocks that are used across all public sector, such as electronic identification and interoperability. So we can ensure that stakeholders have the right tools to improve their digital systems and ensure a common standard for the services that we provide to citizens and businesses. So we have here a main role on setting the pace and developing tools and setting the pace for the discussion.
Great, thank you, Elsa. And it's great to hear that you ultimately report into the Prime Minister's office as well, so that equally you can cascade your policies across all ministries and departments. And we will come back, because I know that you have developed a very interesting pilot, and we'll come to that, and we'll look at this more deeply into the use cases section. But you actually mentioned interoperability, and this is actually one of the topics that I really wanted to have a deeper look into, and how interoperability will play an ever increasingly important role, also in light of gaining these efficiencies and allowing AI models to perform at their best. And so in this context, Andrea, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on successfully concluding the Interoperable Europe Act. DigiDigit has played, for sure, a critical role in digitalization of public sector, and you have been leading now also discussions on AI, and we're grateful because several times Digit participated to our public sector conference. So I would like to ask you, Andrea, can you tell us a bit more about the Interoperable Europe Act, and how will this interplay with the, what we all want, acceleration of AI uptake in the public sector?
Indeed, the Interoperable Europe Act was, the negotiations have recently concluded. We're obviously still finalizing the text, but very soon, most likely beginning of next year, everybody will be able to read it, and it soon after enters into force. It actually has brought about quite a number of changes, which we also hope will have an impact on how data will be managed and governed in the context of public services and the data-driven decision making, and hopefully will also facilitate the use of AI. It brings forward a strengthened collaboration between the public sector entities at level of member states, but also lower levels of government, and also among EU institutions and bodies, because the Act is applicable to all public administrations in the EU. And puts forward the idea to actually have a check, a so-called interoperability assessment check, each time a new public service or a significantly altered public service is to be created. So that check has to be done prior to binding decisions in a case when that public service would rely on cross-border data exchange. So is going to really, we believe, create a new kind of a mindset whereby the interoperability aspects and obviously digital aspects are considered from a very early stage on. It also puts forward the idea of strengthening the idea of sharing and reusing interoperability solutions. So what it really means for the use of AI, and we've indeed been looking at how to foster AI in the public sector. Obviously, there's the overall AI strategy, coordinated plan, and so on. But we also believe that for the public sector, there needs to be some very specific conditions in order to really play a leading role in complying with human-centric use of emerging technologies, such as put forward by the Berlin Declaration, amongst others. So we've been collecting use cases. We now have a big database of over 800 use cases in Europe using AI in the context of public services. And we continue to help further innovation. So the Act puts forward also a strong emphasis on innovation measures that will include, for example, regulatory sandboxes for interoperability solutions. We also have some funding and supporting activities for so-called GovTech incubators and pilots, which can and will, of course, use also AI for the creation of public services. And what we also would like to see with this is, because of this focus on reuse, we would like to see, obviously, reusable solutions put forward for AI-enabled services and decisions as well.
Great, thank you, Andrea, very much. And we will continue discussing on interoperability also later on. But again, this is one of the critical challenges that European Union has still from a cross-border perspective, and an enormous amount of work has been done and progress with the European data spaces already. And later on, we'll see how this could or should evolve to, let's say, offer even larger data sets for the AI models. But I would like to take the opportunity now to welcome Anthony Rietl to the stage. So he was in a meeting, and so Anthony, thank you so much for carving out time and joining us. And Anthony, before we move on, we already started the conversation on the national AI strategies and from a macro perspective. And we heard from Wouter and Elsa that both the Dutch and the Portuguese governments are looking at cross-ministerial strategies. So could you tell us a little bit more about the Polish initiatives, what you are working on? That could be very helpful and informative for our audience.
Right. So first of all, thanks for having me. I do apologize for having to run a couple of minutes late. However, I think the spirit of the conversation appears to be that the general consensus on AI implementation throughout the public sector is broadly through an intergovernmental rather than a separate ministerial approach and task forces. And I probably won't be very creative in here, because this is exactly the model we've been following, the path that we've been pursuing as throughout the Polish public sector. There are about 96 central institutions, about 2,500 local ones. And that's not counting many agencies that are sort of semi-public and broadly independent. So in total, we're talking about millions of people effectively communicating. And the only way to coordinate this effectively and being sort of thorough in progress monitoring, exploring synergies, and all those things that really make for a successful implementation. The only way to do this really appears to be through a very sort of high-level engaging dialogue throughout the institutions engaged. So in our case, there is a strategy set up by the government. It's been a very long consultative process. It's took about a year or so. Then the entities tasked with this, there is a minister that's responsible for this. However, the broad aim is that every institution has their own set of actions and goals targeted by the strategy, and then it's all coordinated with a special cross-ministerial, cross-governmental task force operating in the Prime Minister's office. So there's really sort of there's really an approach of this is a very special case, right? It's not another policy. It's not something that affects only one ministry, only one institution, only one entity. It's something that really applies to everyone. And it's one of the very, very few things that I can actually imagine, the other ones being sort of crisis management committees. But it's the only one, except for those, that is sort of given this sort of treatment. And the only reason for this is because we treat the public sector, however massive it may be, as more of an enabler towards everyone else in the society to really be sort of this driving force of innovation. We're the ones who are supposed to, not do any significant harm to this. We're supposed to be the ones to make sure that they have all the circumstances to conduct their innovative activities. And in order to do this, we need literally everyone on board, because every single business decision is somehow attached to a multitude of government fields. So I think this is really sort of heartening that there is this sort of approach is generally sort of more or less universal across our partner countries, and we'll be very happy to work with them as well on sort of things that I think that differ. But generally, I think this approach is sort of universal.
Great, thank you, Anthony. And I think you very rightly highlighted how AI uptake in public sector is one thing, but obviously the government has a double responsibility to also make sure that there is an uptake in the broader economy. And the recent Commission DAISY survey run every year, it's indicating that the average European AI uptake is currently gravitating around 8%. And Soren was mentioning before that in the digital decade targets, we have a 75% target to be achieved. So I think collectively, and we will talk also about collaborations, public-private partnerships, we have a lot of work to do to propel from 8 to 75%. So now we heard a little bit about the national strategies. We heard about the focus of the Commission on interoperability. I would like now to come to you, Florian, and could you help us understand a little bit more about the role of ECMWF? And you're at the forefront of this technology with your center. And so we would love to hear from you. How do you use AI and what is your perspective?
Thank you, Irina. So I'm obviously from the European Weather Centre, so I breathe weather and climate. That's what we're here for. We're trying to deliver the best service to our member states in general, the national hydrological and meteorological services in that. So you already heard in the previous speech how important AI has become in weather and how it seems to revolutionize an entire industry and how important data are in that. And when we talk about interoperability and connectivity, well, weather doesn't know any borders. It doesn't really care what's underneath it. So collecting data across borders has always been part of us, and so we are governed by UN organizations such as WMO. But I really have to applaud the Commission here too, because particularly in the space of machine learning and AI, they have been really enabling this revolution. And this may be through different things. This may be DG DEFIS through the Copernicus program, where we generate massively and hugely valuable data to do weather forecasts or climate predictions for the future. This is DG Connect, and I know you have a speaker later on about it, who has really seen this vision through the Destination Earth program to sort of accelerate machine learning beyond what can be done now, and really enabling us to hopefully build a European model of weather forecasting and become at the forefront. These data sets are really important, and I'm really grateful for the Commission to supporting the European Centre in providing those data sets across for everybody to use. And that may be small businesses, this is our large businesses, these are government organizations, these are decision makers. It's really the entire value chain for that. So the value of weather forecasting has really driven the interest in this topic, and machine learning has become a really dominant source of innovation there. And I think there's going to be the next year, we're going to hear even more about this. And we are in a truly exciting time at the moment.
Great, thank you, Florian, to bring your perspective. And going now to you, Jeppe. So we heard from governments, we heard from an international body, we heard from the Commission. What is the perspective of industry? What are the latest really groundbreaking innovations that you see in the applications as well? And what are the challenges that you are facing in integrating those new solutions?
Yeah, thank you, Irina, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I think I want to congratulate the panel on the comments. I think they're all very, very relevant, and I think we are at the cusp of another digital revolution that will last for potentially a decade. And I think we all have to come to the realization that artificial intelligence, and in particular generative AI, will change the ways we live and work. I think when listening to my colleague Soren Karan delivering the keynote before, he was talking about which sectors were driving and where are we really seeing the biggest and the fastest uptake. And I think healthcare is one of these sectors where we are seeing most dramatic and most rapid uptake, and we're also seeing and identifying the use cases that make a difference, not just to enterprises or public government, but also to us as human beings. And ultimately, the goal must be to improve the life of humankind. And I think this type of technology, particularly in healthcare, is going to give us a lot of those capabilities. And we talk a lot about medical imaging for diagnosis. We talk a lot about fast forwarding the resolution time to give patients a diagnosis. We talk a lot about drug discovery, of course. How fast can we improve the rate of drug discovery? We saw an incredible pace around COVID-19, around drug discovery as well. We talk around patient planning, therapy planning. So all around therapy planning, individual therapy planning for patients in healthcare. And then, of course, we can also turn to more common day tasks like the hospital workflows and everything around virtual assistants, helping nurses and doctors simply to be more efficient in their everyday work. And when we talk about virtual assistants and all of these capabilities that we see in generative AI and their abilities to help us write drafts or analyze data, this is really the time saver that I think many people will benefit from first. And this will also, of course, be very relevant in government and administration.
Great, thank you, Jeppe. And indeed, again, lots of benefits. Healthcare could be one that has maybe the easiest to understand of those. And indeed, so since we're now already talking about some practical examples, it might be a good moment, maybe Elsa, to ask you to walk us through the pilot that you are doing at AMA with your chatbot. So we understand it's a pilot, but it would be very interesting to already hear what is the response, how does this work, and what kind of efficiencies you're planning to drive with it.
Yes, so we have a pilot, our virtual assistant, a pilot for public services. It was launched last May. It does not have a name, it's on purposes, but it is an innovative AI solution for the Portuguese public sector. It's a first project with AI, a virtual assistant running on AI with an AI solution. It's the first pilot in the Portuguese public sector, and its purpose is to guide citizens in their digital interaction with public services, making use of voice and natural language processing coupled with an interactive avatar. And this virtual assistant ensures 24/7 customer service to citizens, giving information about the digital mobile key. It's the first service that we have on this pilot, and it's easily accessed by any device with an internet connection. The solution is based on the same model that powers OpenAI's ChatGPT, and it is capable, and this is revolutionary because it is capable of recognizing voice and text in Portuguese, responding through both voice and text. These tools enable searching the knowledge base of the digital mobile key and presenting a realistic avatar speech with synchronized mouth movements. Our virtual assistant with an avatar, it's a collaborative work. It is the result of a collaboration between AMA and various private entities. Microsoft was our partner. Defined AI was responsible for developing the optimized voice model for Portuguese and collaborated with a startup specialized in artificial intelligence, which managed their data, which managed the integration and implementation of the pilots. The end goal of this pilot, which AMA is already working, is to extend the knowledge base to most of public services in Portugal. We started with a pilot with one service, information about digital mobile key, and we are already now developing the second phase of the project, increasing the knowledge base to information about other public services in Portugal. And this new version will feature a completely revised user experience and will be able to interact in over 20 languages. So we can address the needs of citizens from other countries who need Portuguese public services. And up to now, we have over 20,000 conversations with the virtual assistant. And it have contributed to supporting citizens in real time for services associated with the digital mobile key. And we have also registered a significant increase regarding digital mobile key activations compared to last year. We saw about 40% more activations. And the assistant may not be the only reason for this, but it sure had an impact by making information available in a simple and innovative way.
Great, congratulations. That sounds really great. And I mean, an uptake of public sector services of this specific service by 40%. I mean, it's again another proof that this kind of AI tools will actually help us drastically in this journey of digitization of public sector. And also noteworthy that this will be available in 20 languages. So also that I thought was pretty interesting. Moving maybe, transitioning to you, Wouter. So the Dutch government has also quite a few initiatives in place, the Dutch AI Coalition, and you also have developed an implementation toolbox for innovative technologies that I thought would be quite interesting. Again, we have a very international audience here with us today, so I thought it's quite interesting to hear the various examples that the governments are developing.
Well, but let me first make this more into let's say also a conversation and react to what Elsa is saying, because I think it's very interesting what Portugal is doing there, and I really I think in Europe we must support the countries taking steps forward and look at how we can cooperate and look at best practices. I think when you look at the concept of virtual assistants in public service providing, we're seeing that there's a stronger demand when citizens get innovative service in the private sector to get the same level of services in public sector. And if you have one-stop shops in private sector applications, we see this with the Interoperable Europe program. We see it with the SDG. We see it now with the programs of the once only principle and the ID wallet. The move towards citizen-centered service is very strong. It's going to be stronger in public sector. And AI has a strong role to perform there because citizens want to be in control of their data, want to have data informed services. And an example of what we're doing in the Netherlands is we're looking at proactive service providing. So we have a whole program with proactive service providing so that you don't have to knock on the door of government to say, I want to be eligible for certain allowances, or I have an extra child and I want these allowances or these extra services because I have a special situation. It's proactive. based on data coming from different sectors, from education, healthcare, housing, and social security. That's one of the programs we're looking at now. The thing you asked me about the Dutch AI Coalition is, I think it's interesting. The Netherlands is 50% underwater, so we need to cooperate, otherwise we'll drown. That's what we're famous for, I think. So what we did with AI is we formed this AI Coalition, which is a platform for industry, like large companies and startups, governments, NGOs, and science, to have a platform to discuss societal issues in, I think, 11 working groups, like education, healthcare, defense, public services, and discuss shared goals, but also shared challenges. What we also do is when governments invest, for example, now we have a several hundred million euro investment in an Netherlands AI program, we discuss it with these multi-level stakeholders, with these NGOs, these companies, because we are convinced that we need private sector and science buy-in, and it can't be a governmental direction only, because we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the speed, we don't have the scientific background. And one last point, sorry, the Dutch are known for talking too much, excuse me. The next point is when we talk about implementation, is that I just discussed that we can't hold this back. So I think our strategy should be based on guardrails. When cars were discovered, we created more safer ways to drive with cars. We didn't ban them because we had horses. So what we're working on is guardrails. And what we did is we formed an implementation guidelines for public officials to work responsibly with AI. And this is mostly based on the workings of developers, operators, system integrators. So they have a huge cohesive set of what should I take into account when implementing this? Because we see a lot of confusion and skepticism and sometimes even unknown regulations holding people back when they want to innovate. A next step, this will be my last point, is we're looking at the concept of an AI validation team that actually benchmarks large language models on the basis of existing regulations. So it is open to see what regulations or guidelines are endangered by the use of certain models and less endangered by the use of other models. This is something we're looking at, but benchmarking, setting open implementation guidelines, I think that helps to, let's say, guide this transition in the right direction we want to have.
Great. No, very interesting. And also the proactive service provisioning. I thought this from a societal perspective, it's a very interesting concept. And Anthony, any comments from you? You also have a leading role in GovTech. So any perspective from your side?
Well, of course, and then without you said something about the Dutch. I think the Poles are known for never letting up an opportunity to speak. So that's something I will say. But no, in all honesty, I would say that I think much has been said about AI-driven tools, and I could go on a tangent about what we've built. However, something that I think have to stress here is that what we're doing is focusing on sort of two parts of the process. Like one thing is the product, which is great. It's super important and has to be very thoroughly approached and designed. But what we've discovered also, coming back to what I said before about the sort of our role as an enabler and sort of this like first stone in an avalanche sort of kind of approach, is that we're also looking on those sort of community-driven AI processes. And I came to the public sector in 2017. I was in the Ministry of Finance, responsible for many things related to this. And something we discovered was that we had our IT teams, we had our people who were pretty smart, who were capable of building nice tools, but this wasn't really enough. The thing that we really needed and wanted was to sort of have a streamlined way of engaging other stakeholders, be it companies, be it third-party organizations, be it some sort of research teams, be it even sort of ragtag groups of students who actually built something, because this was back then when there was no one way, one solution, one answer, right? So what we did, and I know it's, we've looked at what other tools are being used, and what we stumbled up are, one of the first things that come up are, of course, those events and hackathons, those kind of marathon design sessions, and we've decided to sort of crank it up all the way to 11 to sort of make it this but bigger. And as things stand, we've concluded our 6th edition, I think it was 2 months ago, of the Europe's largest hackathon, stationary hackathon, being held in Poland for the last 6 years running, with some break on for the pandemic, of course, because that was a nightmare. But other than this, this sort of energy of community-driven solutions and public-driven problems build the sort of synergy that allows us not to just think about the products we need, but to just come up with needs and challenges and sort of leave it from there, right? Sort of now it's the job of those guys to come up with an actual technical working solution. And at first there was one public institution in there, then there was 2, then there was 2 again, I think, and now there are, I think, 15. So this, and then there are local editions and all this. I don't think there's time for this, but my point being, the projects themselves are super important, but I think that our job as the Prime Minister's Office, as the Ministry of Education and Science, is to sort of design processes that allow those sort of synergies to be semi-automatic, right? So this to be readily available to be used, to create legal certainty for this, to be let's say engage, motivate entities to participate. And I think those processes, we've also dealt with procurement, those very, very niche sort of areas of how to order something in this mode and so on. We've engaged with the Commission on this, we've engaged with everyone who cares about procurement stuff. And the idea was to build something that does not require our input in designing and streamlining and proceeding. It's more of, here is a toolkit that you can actually use whenever you have a problem that can be solved with digital technologies. And that's sort of based on hackathon, based on context, based on procurement, based on some special legal things, based on funding, of course. We've developed this sort of toolkit and given it to public institutions and said, here, if you have a digital need, if you have a problem that can be solved with technologies, including AI, especially AI, here is what you can do. Pick and choose. Here is your menu. And I think that this has worked really tremendously well for us. It's been the engagement of institutions themselves has been enormous, because they themselves were solving their own problems. And I think this was sort of the main driving force of them being actually willing to engage and change, because we didn't come up with their problems for them. We gave them tools to actually solve their problems.
That's great. That's very interesting as an approach, Anthony. Indeed, as you say, so central government is not giving all the answers, but is basically giving the tools to find your own answers, since especially when you have such a distributed public sector infrastructure, basically, and systems. Thank you for that. And indeed, so we spoke a lot about benefits of AI use cases. Let's talk a little bit about technology. And Florian, maybe I would call upon you to comment on whether, from an infrastructure perspective, did you have to make any adaptations, upgrades, when you basically started very intensively to use AI models?
So it's a good question, and we did have to make adaptations in terms of what type of chips we have. We had to increase the number of GPUs or equivalents in order to actually do our model optimization. Having said that, I have to say that the EuroHPC's infrastructure was, of course, provided or is available in Europe, does actually have already very good provisions in terms of training those type of models or using those type of models in terms of forecasting mode. At the European Centre, we've also created, of course, our in-house infrastructures. That's mainly for securing our high reliable forecasts. So we've got something called the European Weather Cloud, pun is in the name, which is really there to sort of provide an operational 24/7 service. And we do this together with our sister or brother organization, which is EUMETSAT in that sense. So we did have to make adaptations. And of course, as probably everybody else across Europe, we are currently desperate for more compute facilities, particular GPUs, in order to optimize our models. I'm pretty sure I'm talking here for absolutely everybody. And this desperation has led us, of course, of trying to make our models more optimal. Sometimes the resource limitation is actually also a bit of a blessing. But it does really hint to probably what the biggest bottleneck at the moment is. We do have data. We need to ensure that the compute is next to the data. So we are dealing with very large data, which sort of is an additional challenge. And there's a few avenues there. I mentioned the Euro HPCs. There's some national compute capabilities which are really excellent. And then, of course, we all run our own supercomputer to do so. But all of them had to be adapted to some extent.
Great, thank you. And indeed, the challenges for compute are, I guess, a very painful subject across several geographies. Maybe transitioning now to the data question. So obviously, we need incredibly large data sets. And here, my question is the following, and for you also obviously to the broader panel, but Andrea, so the Commission has done in this term incredible progress with the European data spaces. And considering that now, as we heard, we need incredibly large data sets to nourish and train the AI models, has the time arrived to maybe start considering what is next? So should we start thinking about interconnecting the European data spaces?
Indeed, what I think is happening, as you know, is the idea was to, at one point, create a common European data space. And the way we've approached this is trying to do that by sectorial approaches and use cases in different sectors. What we have been, at least from our end, doing is identifying already existing solutions that can foster interoperability within a data space. And obviously, in our domain, we've had already quite a number of, for example, semantic interoperability solutions, but also different kinds of building blocks that I think some of you have referred to earlier, that could help some of those data spaces, especially those that, for example, would serve the public sector. And what we have foreseen is that if these interoperability solutions are used within a single data space, that will inherently foster or facilitate the interconnection of data spaces. We see that already. If I think about, for example, the Green Deal data space, which is inherently bringing together data from many different sectors, or even the smart cities data space, which is in a local context, obviously cross-domain by default. But we're seeing more and more of those. And I believe that this is going to be the next big phase for the data spaces, to actually put them into use and try to see how these can be interconnected. And for the public sector, that's going to be extremely beneficial, not only to create more user-centric and even personalized services, and then use the power of AI to actually bring those, like Walter was saying, proactively to the citizen at the place, at the time that they exactly need it. But also, like Florian, you're doing at a much larger scale, but really for example, local administrations, but also governments, to make those decisions based on those data sets that have been shared. And in this case, obviously, not just public sector data space, but maybe the citizens' data, private sector shared in a secure context, immediately cross-domain, cross-border, and so on. So these we believe are extremely promising times for public administrations to benefit from these data spaces.
Absolutely. And Florian, can you tell us about your data exchanges practices? Because obviously in the weather forecasting industry, data exchange is critical, and you clearly had to do it ante litteram, and now the Commission is leading the charge on great progress across all industries. But could you tell us a little bit about your industry, so to speak?
Yeah, so I said already before that I think it's a good question. I said before that weather doesn't know any borders. In order for us to actually operate a global forecast, we do need data from across the globe, beyond Europe. If you want to know what the weather is in Europe, you will need data from the US or beyond that even. So we've always exchanged data and made data interoperable, particular data which are used for weather forecasting. And for us, the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, sets some standards or sets the standards in that area, and we exchange data across that. There's, of course, many new challenges, and I think this is where DG Digit comes in, and what Andrea said is very important. We've got many new data sources, such as IoT data and so forth, which come with new challenges and new ideas how we exchange them. And that's where what Andrea said is quite important in that sense.
Great. And Jeppe, what's your perspective? So are there other avenues possible for data sharing, or are we still thinking in technology that centralization eventually could be the answer, or are we looking also at other models?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you, Irina. I think it's important to keep in mind, and I think this has been mentioned several times, that we don't just need data, we need high quality data. We need extremely high quality data, because it is really it is the old rule of crap in, crap out. If we do not have high quality data, we will not have high quality model, and the models will essentially be useless. So some of the concerns that we have been discussing with customers, of course, is that will we see regulations that will limit the quality of the data? So will we have to adhere to regulations that will degrade the quality of the data that can be used for training our models? So one of the solutions that we've been working on, and this is a technology that we've commonly shared over the recent years, is called swarm learning, where we are actually not sharing the data. We can leave the data in place, but we can share the learnings, the findings, the weights that come from that data. We can share that across entities, so that we do not have to share the data. We can just share the sort of the insight that data can bring. And that may be a potential technological solution to ensuring high quality data, but still keeping data sovereign to governments, to states, to entities.
This is a very interesting concept, and actually leads me to my perfectly to my next question. What about sovereignty in AI? So, and I would ask any of you that would like to comment on this. So is sovereignty a topic for AI ecosystems, and what are the considerations that you believe are critically important from that perspective? Whoever wants to go. Anyone? Any thoughts?
I'm happy to pitch in, but Andrea already unmuted. Maybe she's first.
No, obviously it is a topic of discussion, as you know. For example, in the funding mechanism through the Digital Europe program, there are certain rules to be respected when it comes to working with data and AI systems. And I think in general, what we've been looking at is helping member states implement AI that is human-centric and value-driven, based on those value structures and systems that have been developed in different contexts, such as in the context of the AI Act, as I said earlier, the Berlin Declaration, how to use human-centric emerging technologies for the public sector. What we've done here, and I think that's an interesting approach, is working with the procurement colleagues and developing a set of procurement clauses, by the way, coming from the Netherlands and Finland, and then actually scaling it up now to many public administrations using these procurement clauses would ensure alignment with the AI Act. And so these have now been translated into different languages, and that ensures that at least, you know, those are respecting the rules that the AI Act will put forward, the risk-based approach and human-centric approach. We also have seen that, you know, with this value-driven approach, there is also a need for transparency, again coming from the Netherlands and Finland, but it's again now been put into actual standard, so-called transparency registers, where citizens can see, you know, which of the services are actually using AI in their context. And so that is something that ensures you know, explainability, accountability, and traceability. And obviously, the creation of a Euro HPC and managing the data within our continent is another approach for that.
Great. Florian, any thoughts?
No, sort of just a reflection, sort of trying to illustrate, I think, what was just said. And of course, I deal in weather forecasting and weather warnings, traceability, accountability, and sovereignty of the nations themselves is hugely important there. We can't have those warnings issued by a non-responsible, by an entity which is less accountable than maybe it should be in that sense. So this is a huge topic for us. It's really important that we empower our member states and our national hydrometeorological services to deliver the service they're designed to do and they are instructed to do by their governments. So for me, this topic is actually key. I think I'm handing over to Wouter, who's nodding.
Oh, I was nodding because I thought it was a good point. What I wanted to say about sovereignty is that, but it's a hype term in technology. I've worked a long time on the term of self-sovereign identity, and it is in essence, I think, about not having to being in control and having as least dependencies as possible on entities governing over you. And what is complex about this AI implementation is that the demands for transparency will be more and more complex to organize. The complexer the models are we're using. So from input to model handling and output, we're seeing that the transparency demands we used to have for systems we use for important decisions in society are very hard to apply to when these vendors organize themselves. When it comes to the Netherlands, we have strong relation on citizen data or other high sensitive data that it must be stored on site in our country. We actually have 4 data centers in the country, which even by law are stated that those should be the data centers handling citizen data. But this is about storage. But when it is about compute and handling data, we're seeing that the difference between what we're working on in the public sector and what is offered in the market now is growing. And that is something that worries me when this gap is growing and we are having, let's say, demands from the compute power we had before, and we're putting that on the compute power we're working on now, because I'm not sure we're going to have enough with simply relying on, okay, we need transparency. That's why the AI Act is so complicated now at the moment. This balance between innovation on the one hand, but also geopolitical sensitivities coming in, and really geopolitical dependencies that need to be handled on the highest political level and should not be simply technical people questions.
Thank you, Wouter, and I can't agree more that that sovereignty is today a geopolitical question, and that's also why, excuse me, we see so many sensitivities around compute capacity, where it can be deployed, and with some restrictions that start arising in some parts of the globe. So with that, we reached the top of the hour allocated for our panel today. I would like to really warmly thank all of you. You have all done a fantastic job in helping our audience better understand what are the opportunities in government, what are your plans, and again, thank you to the 3 governments that we had represented on the panel today. And hopefully this session was insightful to unpack one of the 3 dimensions of AI, as Commissioner Breton put it. We tackle data, and we'll have a short break for 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene to tackle the compute issue. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to the second panel of the 8th Public Sector Transformation Conference, looking at sovereign AI in the European Union. The second panel will be looking at how we can empower Europe and at the key to democratizing compute capacity in the EU. In this session, we will look at 4 main themes. The first one is an assessment of the currently available compute capacity in the European Union, be it at European level or and at national level. Secondly, we already heard from some of the previous interventions that AI can be powered by different types of infrastructure. It can be high-performance computing on-premise, or it can be in the cloud. So what is the role of these 2 technologies to power AI? We will touch again upon sovereignty. So we already touched a little bit upon this in the first panel, but nonetheless, we feel that this topic deserves to be digged a little bit further. And lastly, but certainly not least, we will look specifically at EuroHPC JU. What is the role of the JU to empower AI in the European Union, and what are the rules governing the capacity, access to the capacity that the EuroHPC JU has created? So with that, I would love to welcome to the stage our second set of very distinguished panelists. I would like to start with by inviting to the stage Gustav Kalbe, Acting Director, Digital Excellence and Science Infrastructure at DG Connect. Welcome, Gustav, and thank you so much for being with us today. We then have Declan Hughes, Secretary General, Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment of the Government of Ireland. Welcome, Declan, and thank you for being with us. We then have Ana Bofill, ARA Coordinator, Ministry of Digital Transformation of Spain. Thank you, Ana, for being with us and for jumping in for Salvador, who was caught up in a presidency meeting. So appreciate you jumping in. We then have Per Öster, Director, Advanced Computing Facility, CSC IT Center, Science. And then last but not least, we have Iveta Lochowska, Chief Technologist, AI, Data and Supercomputing at HP. Welcome, Iveta. Thank you for being with us. All right. So as we discussed in the first panel, 3 main components: compute, data, and the algorithms. Before we go straight into the compute question, we heard from 3 member states. I could not, help but ask the Irish government and Spain and the Spanish presidency if you could briefly touch upon your national strategies, and in particular, there may be 2 things that I would love you to share with our audience today. So on the one hand, in Ireland, you launched the Enterprise Digital Advisory Forum and the AI Ambassador. And so maybe, Declan, if you could also touch a little bit upon that. And Ana, obviously the presidency has an enormous job with the AI Act currently in the final stages of the negotiations. But I would like to ask you if you could maybe share with the audience a little bit more about the regulatory sandboxes that Spain has recently announced. So I would hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for having us here. Yes, as you said, the Spanish presidency has a compromise with enabling human-centered IA technology, and in this compromise, you know that as AI could contribute very, very significantly to the development of the economy in Spain and also in Europe. There are also some risks that we have to assess, and Spain is playing a very active role in the discussion opening about the European regulation on AI.
This regulation seeks to order the uses of this technology to limit the risks arising from it. And to fulfill this purpose, the regulation establishes a hierarchy of risks depending on the use of the technology and sets out a series of obligations. To this end, is distinguished between two main groups. On one hand, a number of AI systems specifically identified following the application of a risk analysis methodology and include them biometric identification system or critical infrastructure protection systems. And on the other hand, systems that correspond to products or safety components of products that are already covered by other legislation. To adapt the rules of the future AI regulation, and particularly aimed at Spanish SMEs, we are pioneering the development of a pilot test. Also, this sandbox AI we are preparing and we are deploying in the next months is particularly aimed to SMEs because they know they are the fabric of the industrial and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we want to ensure the development of responsible artificial intelligence and mitigate its potential risks to society and the economy. And this project is called the Spanish AI Sandbox, as you say. So we want to assess the threats in a controlled environment in line with the proposed AI regulation, in agreement with the European Commission always. So companies of different sizes from different business sectors will be selected to participate in the sandbox and will receive technological support and expert advice from our Secretary of State, from our ministry. And we also, a little bit later, we contemplate the creation of an IA supervision agency. We believe that all this system will help the Spanish companies, but principally, as I said, the SMEs in the adoption of the new regulation, of the new communitary legislation or regulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ana. And you touched upon the SMEs, and we will come back to that because there are some exciting news, and I'm sure that Gustav, you will tell us more about that in a second. But Declan, do you want to maybe walk us through a little bit the high level of the Irish National AI Strategy, and what kind of things are you looking at? What keeps you up at night, Declan? Oh, you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Irina. Thank you very much for the invitation, and delighted to join you to discuss, I suppose, progress on the EU's digital decade and where we're at in terms of this continued evolution in terms of dealing with new technologies and new developments. And I think it's appropriate that we frame it in the context of the EU digital decade because we're continuously moving towards the 2030 targets, and we're dealing with AI now. Who knows what we'll be dealing with in the next couple of years. But I think what we can draw on is, a little bit like Ana mentioned in relation to take up, and particularly for SMEs, is just the significant progress that is being made around digitalization right across Europe. But I suppose I can talk particularly about Ireland. I think COVID was a particular stimulus to digitalization, and it really gave a spurt to the changing of business models that are so essential that we capture all the benefits of digitalization, both in the public and the private sector. And I see it in both areas. So in the private sector and in the business community, certainly we've seen an acceleration of SMEs that are, for example, that are trading online, that are digitally literate, and also that are investing in, are now generating sales through online e-commerce, etc., but also that are investing in ICT training for their employees. And that's hugely important that we focus on skills development so that the workforce of today have the skills that they need to make the best use of all the technologies in both their own lives, but also in work. but also that we have the aptitudes and we have the skills that are needed for the future. So in particular, I'd highlight in Ireland just the take-up of cloud computing. We're approaching 50% of businesses now that are using cloud services, and that's come from a very low base 5 years ago, but COVID has certainly accelerated that as businesses have moved online. They recognize what they need. But also linked to that is also the acceleration in the use of big data. Now about a quarter of firms who are adept in using big data for either their supply chain management, customer relationship management, and all of that. So, and I think we're really still at the start of that journey, both in the private sector and also in the public sector. And the public sector has had to adjust significantly due to COVID, due to changes in blended working, remote working, providing services. We have now got all of our public services to businesses online and fully available, everything from revenue, etc., as most other countries are making significant progress on the citizen side as well. But that has links then to how do we structure and how do we provide those services, and what computing capacity, etc., is needed, and we'll come to that later. But of course, in the context of AI, now we've got a whole new set of challenges around governance and awareness and understanding of the potential and the use of AI, both in the public and in the private sector. We're seeing it particularly right across the public sector. I can say that I can see it in terms of automation, robotic automation, and dealing with all the dull tasks and taking those out. And certainly the public sector is very adept on the adoption side there, and we can talk about that later. But I think where our own national strategy, which we published in 2021, which is called AI for Good, was very focused on was ensuring that it's a human-centric approach to the adoption and the rollout of AI, and that we also are clear in terms of what it means for individuals and for society and for businesses and how it should be used. So hence why the significant focus now on understanding what the implications and the potential of AI, but also ensuring that we have appropriate guidelines, guardrails, and an ethical approach to the use of AI. A lot of work being done at European level, and Barry O'Sullivan, an Irish academic, is chairing the EU group, expert group on that. And we set up I suppose, just to think about it from a policy and institutional perspective, we appointed an AI ambassador who is a leader from industry, Patricia Scanlon, who's using AI to help in terms of for children with speech and language challenges, and very credible. Understands in terms of societal impacts and benefits, but also is a very good communicator and is very engaged in terms of national debate and dialogue and understanding. We've also broadened out that approach. We set up an enterprise forum initially, which was SMEs and large companies to work through what the implications are for business, but also how we can support business. So hence, we'll talk about that later, with significant support, both direct funding for businesses through small grants of $2,500 all the way up to ensuring that they have access to technology centers and to AI experts that can help them to work through some of the implications. We also had an engagement with with youth, and we had a youth assembly forum about a year ago where we gathered young people to think about the opportunities and the challenges, and it was a very engaged forum, and that helped to provide a lot of indications to us in terms of some of the concerns, but more importantly, some of the potential as the next generation see an AI, because of the extremely digital literate, and they can see those opportunities. Our next step now is building on those initiatives, is also now to set up a national AI advisory forum, which will have a broader range of stakeholders, not just from an enterprise perspective, but from civil society, from various groups in terms of disability, but also focuses particularly on the ethical aspects. And it'll also have an ability to respond quickly to issues as they come up. So this advisory forum will have the capacity, hopefully, to deal with issues, set up subgroups, and then to respond quickly on issues that may come up either in terms of in public discourse or at the request of government or of ministers or others. So essentially what we're really trying to do, Irina, is to ensure that we have a very engaged ecosystem that's available and can continue to respond to the issues that are coming up in terms of both the potential of AI, but also in terms of those challenges which are arising or are coming to light, and that's all working within the context of what's happening at European level and what's happening in terms of part of the presidencies, but in the European Commission initiatives and the AI Act, etc. So it's really important that we have this engaged ecosystem both at national and at European level, so that we're clear in terms of where are the areas that we can focus our attention at a particular point in time. And if I have one final minute, I might just mention some of the work that's been done on standards. And again, this is where national standards bodies are collaborating. We've set up a top team on standards, and they have a standards roadmap. And just to mention that tomorrow there is a webinar jointly hosted by the Irish National Standards Authority and the Danish counterparts, which is mapping out some of the key developments in standards developments and the importance of standards for AI for business and wider society. Thanks, Irina.
Great, thank you, Declan. And I really like your concept of having and generating a very engaged ecosystem. And as you said, you now have an AI ambassador, and I'm curious whether we'll see the European Union AI ministries coming up soon. Some countries, I'm located in the UAE, and they already have an AI ministry. So let alone the digital transformation, but AI is such a big topic that deserves a ministry in itself. So, and then Iveta, maybe I would ask you to comment. So Iveta, you have a very obviously strongly scientific background, but you also are advising governments, you are advising the Austrian government, you are advising the European Commission on AI policies. So do you have any reaction to the initiatives that Declan and Anna has presented?
I'm just just building up on what they said, and through my observation working with governments, but also representing an enterprise approach, I think it was rightly so communicated that a mixture of a very vibrant community and retaining talent within Europe is the first ingredient. Then having a supercomputing strategy to basically give all of those bright people the compute they need to build a POV or to run the first ideas, and then also the guardrails and I think it was Declan, it was your last point in terms of the standards, the regulations, the cultural constraints within Europe. An example of this is, for example, and it's great that we have Anna here, is that we have started this initiative to build AI and data center of excellence. And the first one is in Spain, in Las Rozas, near Madrid, where we are collaborating with universities, with the top talent on AI and data. We are nurturing this talent and giving them access to supercompute. But also for most of our public sector work and European level type of work, they require talent based in Europe. They require local understanding for the regulations, for the RFPs, for the clearance. So it's a kind of a mutual beneficiary for both sides. First, we have the local capacity and we nurture it locally. And then we have the supercompute capabilities to empower those ideas, to nurture them and to bring them to reality. So I think it's a bit of a multi-dimensional approach. It's not just thinking of the supercomputing strategy, of the sovereignty approach, but also how to retain and nurture this talent. Also because it's still very expensive endeavor. So it requires a bit of a hand-holding through this process when it comes to the people, to the human aspect. And AI, especially generative AI, is a very computer resource hungry endeavor. And a proper framework and a kind of a overarching thinking is important here. And this is based on our experience working with the European customers and enterprises. So this is the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you, Iveta. So indeed, the title of the conference today was indeed the resilient and trustworthy ecosystems. And you gave us here already some quite interesting pointers. So we need a multifaceted strategy with 3 ingredients: a vibrant ecosystem, and again, we heard from Declan on the activities in that direction. We need skills, and we need HPC strategies. So we need compute that for our bright European minds to play with and be creative. So what is the state of compute in Europe currently? And Per, maybe I would invite you to comment on this, since CSC is hosting LUMI, which is, according to the new, very recent top 500 ranking from 2 weeks ago, you're now, well, certainly number 1 at European level, and congratulations for that. You're number 5 globally. So you hold certainly a responsibility, Per, for sure, in this whole debate. So how do you look at the status of available compute capacity in Europe today, and how is LUMI granting access, or CSC and LUMI granting access to the various stakeholders?
Yeah, hello, and thank you for having the opportunity to participate here. So I think the status is quite good, and the prospect is promising thanks to EuroHPC and the initiative of EuroHPC, because we have now present capacity, LUMI being one of several, and we also have a plan for future and more capacity here. So I would say in that sense we are in a good shape. And we also have seen during the first year here now of LUMI that the environment we have, the machine that we have, is very suitable for the AI machine learning tasks. And it's actually a bit surprising and fantastic to see that the traditional areas for this kind of supercomputing machines, which is physics, have been overtaken by AI and machine learning applications, actually, during the first year of LUMI here. So in terms of computing capacity, I think we are fine. The major issue here is maybe when we look on the availability of data, for especially if we go for training these models now and taking all the different European languages, specific areas and so on into account. And here we need efforts to really see how we can better serve these efforts to make big foundation models that also are multilingual, take care of European languages, and serve them with quality data. That I see as an issue here, really.
Thank you. And Declan, do you want to maybe give some thoughts, considering that your national AI strategy is one of the only ones that was early on already pointing at the need of compute capacity? So do you have any thoughts you would like to share on this?
I think as colleagues Anahita and Per have mentioned, we're still at the very early stages of digitalization of our economy and society. So what we need, and we're seeing the explosion, and we see it in Ireland in terms of both for data centers, data activity, the use of the cloud. As I mentioned, we're nearly at 50% of businesses now using cloud and moving to those. So as they're looking for scalability, and they're looking for security, and they're looking to expand the range of services, that's only going to increase. And I think, and it's both in the public and the private sector. So I think it's the reason we've highlighted is something that we need to ensure we have that capacity and that connectivity. So it's not just about the processing capacity, but ensuring that all of that capacity is connected with the highest capability in terms of telecommunications networks right around Europe and globally as well. So that's where we have a particular priority. That assessment is continuing and it's ongoing. We have our government's chief information officer, CIO, is actively looking at what more is needed, has decided and has been clear about the national policy in terms of a cloud first policy, and that has been implemented, and we are progressively moving our own services as we digitalize them to the cloud, obviously within all of the concerns and all of the constraints that and the guardrails that apply to the public sector. So I think that's something which we can do at national level, but hence why the European dimension is really important. So our National Centre for High Performance Computing is linked into Euro HPC. And I think the initiative last week from the Commission specifically to encourage and to open up high performance computing to the enterprise sector and to SMEs and startups in particular, I think would be significant, particularly around the AI grand challenges for Europe. I think that will hopefully crowd in the innovative startups and enterprises into engaging as part of the research ecosystem, as part of the policy system to addressing some of those issues. And that's where I think we're going to see increased demand and increased need for investment in our computing capacity. We've also just recently published a new strategy on quantum computing. And again, there's going to be significant increase in capacity needed both at national level as well as that interconnectivity right across Europe. And it's fantastic that we have such facilities as PERS in terms of which are already among the most powerful and well regarded.
Great, thank you, Declan. So I have a question then on the various models that can provision for this compute capacity. So we already touched upon this earlier today, just to highlight that there are different options in the market. So obviously we have PER, we have you here, so we're talking about on-prem HPC, but we also can power AI models in the cloud. And so I was curious if any of you would want to comment on what are the different, let's say, models. Are there any ramifications, or are there any particular considerations that an entity, be it public sector, but also eventually private sector, whether you would place your workloads into on-prem or in the cloud? Any thoughts, anyone?
Maybe I can jump in here. First, there could be multiple technical reasons and arguments for, let's say, running AI in the cloud versus on-prem. And the baseline is that I think we already have a common understanding of more or less the trade-offs when we just want to build something, a piece of software in the cloud and on-prem, and what are the pluses and minuses. But when we move these to an AI conversation, especially deep learning and generative AI, everything becomes exponential. And so most of the low-hanging arguments die. Of course, in the cloud, you have scalability and then kind of playing with price and being price sensitive are very good arguments when it comes to building traditional stuff there. Especially in the AI and generative AI framing and umbrella, and Per mentioned something critical here, data. There's a component like data gravity. So now I'll be a bit technical just to give you a view of the reasons when it comes to latency, where you operate all of this. And this really at scales become a huge problem. That's why great examples, I think you had in the previous panels with Jonas from Aleph Alpha. Per has an example of Silo AI, which is the Aleph Alpha alternative of Nordic. I recently came back from Finland, where I was meeting Per's colleagues, and Silo AI, which is another very powerful large language model for the Nordics. And there is no way that this operates in the cloud, for example, because of this data gravity issue. So where most of the data is or is going to be created, then there's a strong technical arguments to have it running on-prem. Also, fear of IP rights and losing IP rights, security, and inference. Having the capabilities to do inference optimization on the front end and on the back end is, I think, some very good arguments to have it on-prem. As Europeans, I think we are leading the way for everything when it comes to sustainability, not just sustainable IT, but also sustainable AI. And those algorithms tend to be very data hungry and compute hungry and energy hungry. So I think there's a lot more control when things turn into scale to have the sustainability in mind, and you have more power when it comes to deciding where you're operating your data center, with what kind of energy, I'm sure Per has a lot to say on this topic, but those are just a few critical moments when we are taking this decision where I see a lot more arguments to have on-prem supercomputers or kind of a hybrid setup when it comes to the extreme scale of the AI needs. And I would stop here.
Great, thank you, Iveta. And Gustav, apologies, we got carried away with the national strategies, and obviously you design all of this European HPC success. So we would love to hear from you. So if you have any comments on the on-prem versus cloud point, but then also we touched already upon several times about the excitement that the announcement of the President von der Leyen in the State of the Union, so to create access to the EuroHPC capacity to ethical startups. So tell us a bit more about your latest initiatives. That would be great.
Yes, well, thanks for giving me here the opportunity to shed some light on the question. I mean, on the difference between using cloud and HPC, Iveta has already replied very well. So I would look at from a slightly different angle, and making here the connection indeed with the initiative that our Commission President, Ms. von der Leyen, has announced this year in a speech of the Union by launching this new initiative to provide startups in AI access to the supercomputing power that we have in Europe. And we're very proud that with Lumi we have top machine in Europe, machine in the top 5, and the other European supercomputers from HPC are not far away. Now, if you look at the question, you could be very simple. Why did our Commission President come up with this initiative if cloud would have been the solution? So there's clearly a very specific need for the AI for the most advanced applications. I mean, we're not talking about all applications in AI, but large language models, generative and foundational AI. I mean, with the large volumes of data that you have, with the number of parameters you have to control, there's no other way than to go for the supercomputers that we have. And you might ask, is the capacity we have sufficient, or by adding more AI capabilities to those supercomputers, can we not gain yet another step in performance? Now, the reason why this new idea of our Commission President is so timely is that AI tried to look at experts, even if in very deep pockets, we'll hardly find them. And the brilliant minds that dare to launch themselves in those AI challenges, I mean, they're startups or micro companies that have no resources. They don't have even the financial capabilities to build or access on a market condition the compute power that they need. And this then makes a very nice link with the overall EuroHPC policy of the European Union to make available as a public infrastructure this massive supercomputing power that you need to do frontier research, to remain at the forefront in science, innovation, but also for business purposes. So here we are now combining the very well-established supercomputing power that we have established together with the competence that we have around to make this available to those brilliant AI creators to do the research and development of their models, to test them on the machine. And as Iveta pointed out, I mean, if you have a machine with 4 GPU accelerators, you can maybe play a bit with your model, but you cannot simulate how it scales up on a machine that has 20 or 30,000 accelerators. And that's where we have such a good link between the public infrastructure that we're making available to the benefit of the public users in Europe with a policy towards encouraging innovation and encouraging the emergence of startups that will create the business models of the future.
That's great, Gustav. Very exciting also because it goes back to the main theme that we addressed earlier on the digital divide. So how do you make sure, and you put it very well, how do you make sure that organizations, startups that could not access compute capacity on market conditions can still actually, have the infrastructure to realize their ideas? So maybe Iveta, do you want to comment on this initiative?
Everything that Gustav mentioned is brilliant. First, we are touching on the key important points, which is talent. You can have all of the compute in the world without the brains to actually use it. It's basically useless. And so again, in the under the umbrella of AI and generative AI, again, I think talent is the crucial point, retaining talent in Europe and nurturing it, but also understanding the complexity of the domain of AI and how difficult it is and how many failures it requires to get this right. So there needs to be a room for experimentation and tolerance for ideas to flourish and die, and is still being nurtured through having a infrastructure to support those ideas. The best example I could give here is just treating it as a deep tech investment. And deep tech requires time and requires big pockets with from either government or enterprise organizations to provide basically the investment for compute, the investment for the top talent to stay in Europe and not being fancied by the salaries and the environments overseas. I think for the flourishing of startups, again, best examples, Aleph Alpha, Silo AI, the French guys with Mistral AI and Hugging Face are the perfect examples of how you try to retain talent, how you have kind of a national support for it with the German government, with the Finnish government, with the French government, and then you have the European Commission trying to provide an infrastructure that actually give access to as many people as possible to be enabled. And we have very talented people coming out fresh out of universities with great ideas. I constantly work with them. I teach at university, so I know it's possible. It's just democratizing it and bringing it to a level of accessibility that is required.
Great. And Gustav, are there, I don't know if it's too early stages, but do we already have a sense of how you will determine, to which startups you will give access, or anything you could already share would be helpful?
No, definitely. I mean, after the speech of our Commission President, we defined and already launched a number of activities that will help and accelerate the emergence of AI models, AI usage on the supercomputers, with a particular focus on the startups and covering the whole ecosystems. So we have a very recent action that was just announced last week at the AI event in Madrid, where we are now launching a challenge to startups with very clear conditions, and the best model will get access to, I think it's 4 million core hours on Lumi or on Leonardo in Bologna, to really incentivize and motivate the existing startups to showcase what they can do and give them the opportunity to scale their models. Now, this is a very nice short-term approach that we can implement very quickly because the startups exist, because supercomputing exists. But in the mid and long term, if you really want to build the ecosystem, this is complemented by a number of measures. One is talent and know-how. We really need to help the community of, be it AI programmers, be it AI users, to ensure the models, applications are really made in a way that they can take full advantage of the supercomputers. So we are launching still at the end of the year the creation of a European Support Center for AI on HPC, building on the pockets of knowledge, of competence that we have on the specialists that know how to run AI, large models, on the supercomputers. We're also opening up a dedicated track for access on the UHPC supercomputers. I mean, we already have different access modes, like experimental access, like running the very large physical models. We're now going to introduce a dedicated access mode just for large AI applications, so that beyond the challenge we just launched with the startups, even beyond the startups, for other actors, they can request access to the supercomputers for their AI problems have a certain reserved time for it that has been set aside, but also benefit from the local presence, from the local competence to help them run and train their models. This, of course, is just some of the actions. Will be, of course, investing in the fundamentals of programming supercomputers for AI. We also realized, as Per already indicated, that when we designed and procured the current UHPC supercomputers, they were designed not having in mind so much an AI focus. Of course, the supercomputers that we now have are very good at running AI models, and we've seen very good examples in Leonardo. We see daily very good examples in Lumi. But the question is, how can we now upgrade those supercomputers to make them much more AI ready? And here, in a couple of years, or maybe much earlier, we'll not say anymore that Lumi is number 5 in the world. Maybe we'll say Lumi is number 1 in the world for running large AI problems. The current ranking is done on a synthetic measure, which has no practical value. And if now we optimize the machines and take as a reference a very special AI problem, maybe Lumi is the best computer in the world for that. The problem we now have is that there's no agreed benchmark to measure the power of an AI algorithm. So we cannot make that comparison yet, but this is where we get that in some time with the various activities that we have in combining our AI strategy and policy in the European Union together with the HPC, because one without the other cannot work. We have certain AI that doesn't need supercomputing. We have supercomputing that is not AI, but the two are not possible one without the other.
Thank you, Gustav. And so looking at how much you're doing indeed towards democratization of compute, I think it will be very interesting to see whether other regions of the world will actually follow this European model to provide publicly funded compute capacity to their excellencies. So I think it's going to be quite interesting and good that the Commission took such good care in very early stages to go into this direction. Maybe I don't know, Per, did you want to comment on the previous point?
No, well, I think Gustav have told the whole story almost. But so one thing with this on-prem and cloud, I would say, I mean, in a way, you could say that Lumi is in the cloud also, because all usage is remote, in the sense that we are, so it's with the European Commission and enterprise together with a consortium of 10 countries here that are using it. And I mean, we are hosting the system at CSC, but it's really used remotely. All usage is remotely from other organizations. But I think, and that in that sense, the supercomputers here are absolutely necessary for creating the foundation models and that training. But of course, then we can see that applications that fall out of this, where the, so to say, the downstream models of this turn into services, that can be very suitable to run in the cloud, where you just need the capacity for the, so to say, moment when you need it. And that is another type of environment maybe that you need for that. And that development also need to be looked into, yes, for providing the services following out of the creation of the foundation models. So.
Interesting. Thank you for this additional observation. And maybe looking at now again at the topic of sovereignty. So we can't help but obviously look into this subject also in this panel, because it's such a critical and pervasive way in the way we think about technology nowadays. And this is actually the same in a lot of regions in the world. And it's clearly not just a European trend. And from that perspective, Anna, I would like to come to you, as the presidency has been doing quite some work on strengthening the open strategic autonomy. And so I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about the thinking of the Spanish government on the sovereignty requirements and the work that you have done during the presidency. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lorena. As you know, the sovereignty is one of the big issues in all these technologies, and for stressing that or securing that, we are first of all, from the regulation point of view, we trying to ensure the security of the Spanish technologies and in the European Union, and it's a difficult equilibrium, if you want, between the opportunity or the need to be open to other countries and to other technologies and scientific advances, and on the other side to keep our technology safe. I mean, and to keep our sovereignty, to keep us as a leader and controlling what we can do with our technologies. It's difficult. It's a big field for discussion, I guess. And we were just yesterday. We got here a conference on quantum technologies, and we've got an extensive discussion about that, because there are some voices calling for more no borders for technologies, no border for scientific research, and to have a common field in basic research. But we also know that there are some issues that we can't allow to go out of our frontiers, and we have to keep an eye what we are doing, and we are when we are working and to strict. I mean, because some researchers have other opinion of this issue, and they maybe want to work more openly with China or with I don't know, other countries, USA, and it's a fact that the USA is asking us for collaboration in some fields that, indeed, in the quantum field, that we are not. Well, it's a little bit a lucky surprise, I would say, but we still have to be very aware of the issues on our sovereignty, and to keep our technology safe, and if I may say, if I dare to say, to be a little bit egoistic with this thing. I mean, in order to keep our sovereignty in the same way, we want to be sure that our patents are, that we have a right or an easy way to patent our knowledge and our advances. And in that sense, our new quantum strategy will also put in place a faster way to patent advances in this field. But we are very aware that we need to cooperate and to combine these efforts with the European Union efforts. So this is a central discussion, a very important one, a very deep one, I would say. And I'm afraid it's not close. I mean, there are different views on that, and we have to keep in mind all these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I think you put it really well on the challenge on how we strike the balance between, as you put it, keeping technology safe and remain open and allow scientific advancements. And so I'm curious if anybody else on the panel would like to comment on this topic, because I think it's a notion that pretty much every type of organization is struggling with. And so curious if you would have any further comments.
I think maybe Irina Declan here. I might just comment that we've probably got to a certain stage in the use of AI, as I mentioned, in terms of the dull and the day-to-day tasks. But we're now really getting into understanding the significant potential of AI has for transforming our education, healthcare, enterprise engagement, and solving some of those more complex problems. So as we move up the complexity curve, I think that's where this engagement between the scientific community, enterprise, and the public sector is really important. And that the engagement through national advisory groups and other groups can only be very helpful. One particular initiative I'd highlight in that context is our national European Digital Innovation Hub for AI. And again, thanks to the Commission for the designation, which is our national centre in data analytics in University College Dublin. So that has been designated now as a national support for first as almost a gateway or a first engagement for the public sector and for enterprises in terms of to help on understanding the complexity, those more complex problems, but also taking them through in terms of how best to resolve those. And the fantastic thing about CEDAR is that it's also, of course, linked into European the HPC network and the capacity that's there. So as we deal with these more complex problems and need that capacity, that we have access to that for both the public sector and for the private sector. And a further initiative is that the public sector in Ireland, as part of our approach to the adoption and the rollout and use of AI, will have also access to research teams and to dedicated researchers at PhD level from our Science Foundation Ireland. So again, it's trying to integrate the research and scientific community into those significant national public administration problems and public service problems and how best to solve them, but also as a resource for sharing and for upskilling in the enterprise sector. And as part of that, we see that our own national Centre for High Performance Computing, really critical that it has access and is fully integrated into the European HPC network, and our own Department of Further and Higher Education will be commencing a review next year again. I said ensuring we have capacity for today, but also for the future, and what investment is needed to ensure that we're fully connected to HPC at the European level and more broadly. So that openness, that engagement, and also the focus on a connected ecosystem, I think, is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gustav and Per, do you guys have any comments on this complex issue?
No, indeed, Irina, this is a complex and delicate issue, but of maximum importance for the European Union and the member states. And I would just like to complement what the two previous speakers have said and start from, let's say, the backside. And here AI is not different than any other strategic technology or capability that we have among us. If you just look at the transformative character that AI has, the impact it has or will have on health, security, well-being, the economy, prosperity, and so on. If you are not largely in control of the whole AI ecosystem, you are at a disadvantage that will have negative impact, maybe just on the competitiveness of your industry because you are slow in producing things or things are less intelligent. But ultimately, it goes even to the national security, public safety, and public health. So from the ownership and access to the data, the computing resources, the talents, the basic technology, the more you have under your control, the more you have direct and unrestricted access, the better it is, of course, for your sovereignty, and that's what we call sovereignty, which does not exclude, of course, that for certain aspects we are engaging in cooperation with like-minded countries, or that we are self-sufficient and not also taking imports of other competence, resources, or technology. What matters is that there's no weak link in the full value chain, so that the ecosystem in itself can remain functioning according to our principles. And here make the bridge to the AI Act. We just want to implement AI according to the European values and ethical rules and European conditions. And therefore, we need to master the full ecosystem.
Great, thank you, Gustav. And Per, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I only to emphasize what has been said. To have control on the creation of a number of these foundation models is very important, considering exactly these European values and the special situation with the many languages in Europe that we need to take into account. And I when talking to my American colleagues, yes, they acknowledge these problems, but yeah, English is fine, yeah, for them. And that is the focus, and they don't see the issue with the data and so on. They think they have plenty of access to data. But that is not the case. I mean, in Europe, we need to take more things to take into consideration here. And also that we are in control of this. So we don't get these biases and so on that are so easy creeping into these models if you are not being careful.
Great. So what I understand and what I hear, control over the creation of foundational models, precisely because the AI revolution will touch upon parts of societies that are very strategic, healthcare, defense, as Gustav, you mentioned. So maybe just in the interest of time, as we are approaching the end of our panel, I would like to transition to our big last macro topic. And we did already discuss about it to quite some extent, but just to maybe dig a little bit deeper. So we discussed obviously about the access to the existing compute capacity, and we looked quite closely to the access of startups. But looking at the current EuroHPC JU rules, let's say from a standard perspective, and parking for a moment this new initiative, do we need to have any adjustments? I mean, we heard, Per, from you that the HPC, when LUMI was designed, there was practically no expectation that the major workload that will run in LUMI will be AI. So I'm just curious if this, evolution of the workloads and how intensive AI is in terms of compute capacity, do we need to rethink the rules that we currently have to access compute capacity of HPC centers in Europe, or not really? Anyone wants to take the question?
May I start here, and then Gustav can correct me, compliment. What I see, I mean, the present system for accessing this system is based on excellence of science. I mean, researchers, companies can apply for getting access to the EuroHPC resources that are now all over Europe, and it's basically based on the excellence of their projects. And that is working fine. It is the way we usually do this. And but what I see and is as a demand here also is that larger initiatives, research collaborations, research infrastructures, and so on, ask for more strategic allocations during long time, knowing that they have access to something for a longer period, maybe several years. And that has been reluctance to do this. We have done it for some. It's been done, provided by the Commission or EuroHPC JU, for example, for Destination Earth, where we are also supporting in LUMI. Because if you do these strategic allocations, you pre-allocate for long time the systems, and you so say there is very little agility to take on things. But maybe as we get more systems online and more capacity, maybe this is something I think one should think of, allocating, having more of these strategic allocations for specific task, so to say. Then that maybe Gustav want to comment on this, but that's my.
Gustav, any thoughts?
No, indeed. I mean, Per is absolutely right. I mean, we have an access policy at the UHPC that was agreed with all the participating states in UHPC and the Commission. This was done at a situation which I wouldn't say is now obsolete, but was done at a time where we did not have this specific access needs on the large AI models. And as this year, I mean, we have seen now more and more demand from this very dynamic, in particular startup company in AI. They experience the difficulties of a system that was not foreseen for their specific usage needs. So that's why we are now at the UHPC joint undertaking, overhauling the access policy to first include a dedicated fraction of the time only for large AI users that are not compared with cosmology or weather and climate or other foundational science based on excellence, but looking at what is the best AI model. So that's where we're protecting and taking some part of the access time just for the AI so that there's no unfair competition. The other thing we need to probably to review is then how the effective access is provided. I mean, maybe for a physicist, the way he needs the computing capacity when it's granted looks different from an AI user that might need more longer periods or more repetitive access. I mean, these are not the very practical questions that we discover as the demand is rising. And our difficulty there also is we are somehow victims of our success, and the supercomputers are overbooked. So we keep adding capacity across Europe, and we're now actively thinking how we can enlarge the AI capabilities of the existing machines by adding more racks. But this, I trust, will solve the problem, at least temporarily, but then we'll again hopefully be victim of our success and have an overbooking and keep building and upgrading the infrastructure as we've been doing since the launch in 2018. And hopefully in a couple of years, we can also run parts of the AI algorithms on the quantum accelerators that we now start to integrate within the UHPC machines. And I would say from the AI perspective, this is probably very early days, but as the quantum computers are maturing and are being procured now for UHPC, we'll also get the users access to these quantum architectures to then optimize the way the AI models are developed or trained and then at the end run on the supercomputers.
Great, and I think, Gustav, to your point, it's great to see that the Commission is so promptly reacting on the changes of usage of this capacity, and great to hear that you will adapt basically the access policies accordingly. And maybe, Veta, to close on this topic, unless anybody else will have more comments. So you're obviously a scientist, university professor. So do you have a user's perspective on the capacity access point?
Yes, I'm very opinionated on this. I think earlier Declan mentioned that they're building something like an AI advisory arm. And first, giving access and having the environment is great, but then having a world-class experience of different business models, different use cases, how to scale things. It's not just giving them access. And yes, physicians and computer scientists and mathematicians like me can spend the time through the scientific community to get onboarded, but just lowering the bar of who has access to what. So semi-technical and non-technical people, or just people with diverse background, which are biologists and geography and different kind of sciences that do not have ultimately the skill set to jump on this supercomputer game immediately, is something that requires hand-holding, either a solution architect or ML engineer or a data engineer who helps them with this journey. But also we don't want this to stay just a scientific endeavor and on a paper level. This needs to be somehow for good purpose, for precision medicine, for precision agriculture, for climate experiments and ESG experiments, and we need to turn this into something very actionable. So having this kind of expert guidance, and I also see it at university and working with startups very closely, is a must, because having a scientific mindset could end up with just having endless experiments and benchmarks and trying to improve your models or trying to scale them. But having the advisory expertise of how to scale this or how to commercialize it, or what are the business models, or how could this be a precision medicine project turned into a startup and then scale from there, kind of adjacent things to the whole foundational pillars of, yes, you have the brain and you have the supercomputer, but then this needs to be wrapped up around something that turns to be useful. Otherwise, we constantly would just need to extend the RACs and the HPC capabilities to accommodate for many ideas, but optimization is also needed and a bit of hand-holding. But I will stop here. I see Per and Gustav smiling, so
yeah, I must make a short comment on this, because you are very much right here, because the traditional way of using supercomputers is quite cumbersome. I mean, there are, as you say, physicists, mathematicians are used to the command line interface that are usually there. But for this reason, actually, we 2 weeks ago introduced a web-based interface to Lumi. So you can, where you from the web-based interface can start your AI tools, Jupyter notebooks, and access your files, drag and drop, etc. And I think this is also the way we have to open up these environments to make it more usable for a wider variety of researchers that are not focused on the computer science, but their applications, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe a very, very final question, in case you have any brief comments before we close our panel today. I was curious whether you would have any thoughts about what would be a recipe for success for public-private partnerships. So what will make these ecosystems work? So we already heard vibrant ecosystem, we heard skills, we heard HPC strategies. Anything else you think we need collectively in the European Union as stakeholders to take into account to make this public-private partnership succeed? Any final thoughts on that?
Maybe just something for me. I think that the last conversation has really summed up for me in terms of just that, we're entering a very different phase now in terms of the potentialities for our capacity and for what we need and from HPC and how it can contribute to transformation of the economy and society, particularly as we face the two transitions of digitalization and green, and which we haven't really talked about in climate, but that has really come through. I think what would be really powerful is using those principles in terms of around optimization, in terms of access, in terms of, in a way, the facilitated engagement between the public and private sector. We know what the big policy challenges are, and I think having a small number of use cases which are really complex and sort of say, big knotty problems, whether it's in healthcare or education or indeed defense and security for other colleagues, in terms of productivity growth, etc. So a small number of use cases where we could focus, I think would be particularly helpful, and it would help to demonstrate in terms of how we can respond to demand and ensure that we do have an open and collaborative environment. So I leave it there. I won't suggest them, but maybe there's that idea of a small number of use cases which would be very powerful in terms of demonstrating to business, but also to society about the potential and the use which we can apply, as we call it, AI for good.
Great, thank you, Declan. And indeed, and also this conference, and the reason why we wanted to dedicate this 8th Public Sector Conference to sovereign AI in public sector. So we did this knowingly, that this is in a very, very early stages of AI adoption. However, we also noted from one of our keynoters that there has been an incredible acceleration over the last months. And we hope that also this conference could have offered a small contribution to the public debate, on usage of AI in public sector. So with that, I would like to warmly thank all of you again. You equally did a fantastic job in helping our audience today understanding better some of these critical, questions. And again, Gustav, I think we really celebrate the initiative of the Commission to democratize access to compute capacity. And we believe that this kind of initiatives will play a tremendous role in making sure that we don't create in our societies yet a next AI divide between GPU poor and GPU rich. With that, I would like again to thank you so much. And to our audience, I would like to thank you for being with us today, for having joined the 8th Public Sector Transformation Conference. We do hope that you have found this session informative, that it helped you think about some of the critical aspects of the AI ecosystem that maybe are slightly less talked about than the more mainstream topics. And we hope that we'll see you all next year at the 9th Public Sector Transformation Conference. Thank you all.